Gonna make a special little tool today. I want to change the valve seals on my red car. So I could go out and rent a spring compressor and take the head off and replace them, or I could build a tool that lets me do it while the head is still on the engine and then not replace any gaskets. Let's try that. I got some square tube and a welder and, well, a whole pile of miscellaneous stuff, so let's make something happen. Alright, so this is the contraption. This would be what I would call the valve spring compressor in its first version. It's got a square tube pivot on a piece of angle, and this is just more of a lip that hooks onto the cam carrier, the casing. That's a piece of tube that's been sliced up and diced to kind of fit around the valve with the cam in the way. And this part here is just a threaded rod that comes off the e-brake handle of a Chevette. Felt right using Chevette parts to fix a Chevette, so let's see it in action. Alright, well, I did get the first rocker out, so that's out and set aside. Now we're going to try for the retainers on the valve spring. I've got the cylinder plugged with some rope right now, and then I brought the cylinder up, so now it's pushing, holding these valves closed. So I can put pressure for fun on there easily. Looks like it seats okay on there. See if my little magnet's gonna pull those off or not, those retainers. Doesn't look like it. This is the part where I'll have to get a little bit creative, I think. They do pop out. Well, it took me a few minutes of playing around. The rocker came out, and I finally was able to retrieve the retainer. I just have to figure out a different way to actually get a hold of the retainer and remove it. It seems the compressor style that I made with where it presses on the top end of the spring, it sort of takes up some space that would otherwise be helpful to get in there, but I can't do a lot different than what I've got now, maybe a few tweaks, and I'll have to see what's up. It's easy to cut this and change it at this point, so I'm actually going to try to put it back together just to test that process as well, because this motor, this is the one that was in the Red Dragon, the burnout car, and it's got the main bearings are cooked in it now. It's super tight, so this is the only way this will ever run again. Well, it runs barely, but it would need a rebuild if it was going to get used for anything, so it's a good candidate for testing purposes. Finally, time to replace the valve stem seals. So I've got my exhaust and intake seals. They are a little bit different. I've got my custom homemade tool that really is going on its first official run. I did the trial run a few times on that other engine and it seemed to work okay. This will be the real test. So I've got to dismantle a few things on the top end to access the valve covers, remove both valve covers, and get everything ready. I have to keep it super clean, not drop anything and lose parts. Hope that's not a premonition here. Yeah. See if we can't go through this slow and steady and get them replaced and hopefully reduce the amount of smoke on this thing. So I've got both valve covers removed, the air cleaners removed, the wiring harness is just kind of pulled out of the way, same with the plug wires. I'm going to start on cylinder number 1. I'm going to take out the spark plug, and we're going to basically get ourselves ready to remove the first rocker and kind of go from there. So I'm going to try to maintain the cleanliness here as much as humanly possible and not contaminate what I've got going on, and yeah, let's go from there. This plug is ruined. It's time for a set. My goodness. My compression tool made it easy. We remove the first rocker now. That would be on the intake side. And everything is still intact here. The lifters were stuck in the heads last time, and they're still buried down in there, so that's not a problem with me. They can stay right there. Now I have to remove the retainers on the back side of the spring. So the next step here is to actually block the valve from being able to go down when I press the spring. And to do that, I've got this. Just some rope here. And I'm gonna feed the rope in through the spark plug hole and try to get maybe 12 inches or so of rope coiled up inside the cylinder. And then using a socket on the crankshaft, which I have down there, I'm gonna slowly bring the piston up until it touches the top. With my compression tool, I can then push down on the spring retainer, the cap, and it should unlock that spring. I can retrieve the keepers, and I just use my small magnet to retrieve them. And then I should be able to take the spring right out of there. So let's get it all set. Okay, and the one thing with my tool, because it's kind of a custom tool, I have to just make sure that the cam lobe is facing away from the spring. So it's going to take me a second attempt at this because I spun the wrong direction, but not going to matter. That is locked up. So now the piston has the rope and it's got it pushed against the top end of the engine, keeping those valves in place. You don't want to release the valve latch or the valve locks to have the valve fall inside the cylinder, because then you'll have a problem. You'll have to go get it. The valve is actually turning over the engine, so I just have to get it unstuck. It might take a little bit of tap from a hammer just to loosen up the keeper there. Well, let's play with it and see. That was all it took. 2 gentle taps from the hammer. There's half the keeper. Haha, there's the other half. So now we can actually remove the valve spring and finally get to that seal we're looking for. Alright, there's the valve spring. Hopefully this won't be too difficult to see, but right down inside there, that is the back end of the valve. All over that valve and pushed into the cylinder head would be the actual valve seal. There she is in her dried out glory. This is, I know it doesn't translate on camera, this is legitimately rock hard rubber. Very, very stiff. There's not much flex left in it. So these ones are labeled intake. And because we're on the intake valve, I'm going to take one of these out and get it oiled up and ready. Okay. Slide this over the valve. And we have to make sure it actually seats all the way down. So I'm probably going to put a socket on there to push, or maybe a box wrench and push, and try to push some equal force down there and get it to latch properly. Looks like a 3/8 box wrench might be a good choice here. Ha, yeah, that works pretty good actually. I think we are completely bottomed out on that. Looks like it's exactly where it needs to be. Okay, so okay, the engine is still jammed up. That's perfect. Time to get the valve spring. All right, so I've got the top cover for the spring, and I've got my keepers. I'm going to drop the keepers in there, so now they're already in position. So once I get this over top of the valve stem and start putting pressure down with the tool, those keepers are going to lift up into the larger opening, and then they should latch onto the valve where it's got a cut in it and drop back into position and hold everything in place. From my experimenting previously, I found it easier to have the keeper facing the rear and the front of the car, have the separation line go from basically front tire to front tire. To me, it was a little bit easier in case I had to coax it into place with something and give it a little push. Okay, that's locked back down. Now I'm just going to give a gentle tap on the valve stem itself. I want to make sure that those keepers are locked in. When I was experimenting on the other engine, I did have one time where this spring was tensioned and the keepers must not have been positioned just perfect, and they actually popped out. So just a little further step here to make sure I'm not going to have trouble down the road. I think this is probably, yeah, the handle of this will be a pretty good tool to use. Just gently, ever so slightly, give a little tap. Beautiful. Okay. I think we are ready to remove the rope from inside the cylinder and get ready to reinstall the rocker on this one. The rope is out, so we should have enough room to now open and close that valve without any interference. And the cam lobe is away from where the rocker's at, so it shouldn't interfere with the rocker install. Got our little piece that goes on top of the valve there. Perfect. It's ready to slide in place. Rocker's back in. Alrighty. Now I gotta do that 7 more times. for the exhaust and the intake back and forth. And then hopefully I won't burn as much oil. So I'll save you the details and I'll see you at the end. Well, she's fully reassembled and I think it's ready for a test fire. Pretty sure I've got everything back where it was. I'm thinking it should be fine. So it took longer, definitely longer than I anticipated it to take. The biggest trouble I had with the whole thing, well, there was two things. Number one, getting the rope situated inside the cylinder so it would block the exhaust, or particularly the exhaust valve. I think because where the spark plug hole is, it seems to be favoring the front portion of the cylinder, so to try to get the rope to spin around enough. And the thickness of this rope, even at top dead center with the piston, if there was only one wrap of rope in there, it wasn't quite enough. And the best scenario I found is when I could get it doubled up under itself. That's when it seemed to hold the valves a lot better. So maybe a larger diameter rope. My tool, so it worked. It definitely worked. I found that the worst of it was having to unlock the valves, kind of tapping on this with a hammer. This thing was taking a bit of a beating. You can see there's some bending from it now. Even the top of the square tube here, my little finger was bending. So it's not like, it could totally be boxed in and stiffened. This whole tool could be reassessed and strengthened, and it might not be a bad idea to keep it just for that reason.